Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So Aaron Rodgers is off the Pat McAfee show, which there's two different ways to look at that. I want to get into this because it's very interesting. A bunch of things have happened in the world of sports. This is the year of the amateur, and they just fired Bill Belichick. Nick Saban, the coach of Alabama football, if you're not familiar with that, he's a Alabama has been the standard the last 20 years. I don't know how long he's been coaching, but the number one college coach, the number one pro coach, have one retired and the other one was fired. And then there was a coach for Seattle Seahawks, Pete Carroll, who won a Super Bowl, sort of a legendary coach there, was fired. And so you have these things happening in the world of sports, upheavals, things like that. And then this is, very interesting story. Now you can look at Aaron Rodgers as being controlled opposition, which I don't believe he is. He's a part of the show, as is Pat McAfee and all these other people. But Aaron Rodgers seems sincere in his beliefs. And he, wasn't somebody who volunteered to be in this position, right? Like he wasn't outspoken about this until the media went in after him about, what happened was he was asked about his boop status, right? And he said that he was immunized. And he did it in air quotes, right? And he didn't want to talk about his status because he saw the way that anti-boopers were being demonized. And he wanted to, this was 2 years ago or last year when he was playing for the Green Bay Packers. And he got sick and he had to be quarantined, which meant he wasn't, he didn't get the boop, right? He didn't get the boop. That was the only explanation. So now reporters knew that he had said this thing about immunized. And so he explained it as that he had a peanut allergy or something, so he couldn't take the one thing. He had COVID. And when he looked into it, it just wasn't right for him. And so he took some homeopathic remedies, which he called being immunized. And the media set in on him. And he didn't volunteer for that position, just like Kyrie Irving. He didn't want to talk about it, but they went after him, just like they did with Kyrie Irving. And Jimmy Kimmel was amongst these people. And it was, they all turned out to be wrong. I mean, we all know that now. We should all know that now. That the way that they went after people and, and it was based in being Pfizer shills, basically, or being, big pharma shills. All these reporters and people, were working for companies that had a financial relationship with Pfizer, as did these politicians. And so they are pushing this agenda, and we now know this agenda to be completely false. And they demonized people and mistreated, all of us who were, we wanted our own be able to make our own medical decisions. And he was amongst them. And that's where this all comes from. And it's still coming from that place, right? And so I showed you this the other day, but I left out the end. And the end's kind of the best part, where Aaron Rodgers talks about, basically truther stuff. And then I got another clip to show you. And he has since been removed from the Pat McAfee show. And there's two kind of ways to look at that. I'll get into that as well. But the media is certainly looking at it like he got fired. And that's the way that they're presenting this thing. And so let's start here.
From the internet especially during COVID, the canceling that went on, the censorship, using the government to try and censor people that happened. And if that doesn't work, then they go to name calling. I mentioned a lot of the names that I've been called, and they don't stick because I'm not anti-vax. I'm interested in informed consent and things that are in the best interest of my body. I'm not a MAGA. I've never had any affiliation with anybody associated with that movement, right? Which is okay if you are, though. Like, there's different opinions all over the place, right? If that's your ideology, that's fine. I'm not a super political person.
See, what he's talking about here is, they try to link us and group us all together, right? As Trumpers and MAGA people, that's what they said about Aaron Rodgers. And I said that when Jimmy Kimmel kept on linking Trump and Aaron Rodgers together, like these people that you can hate, and they're all from the same ideology. And that's what Jimmy Kimmel is pushing this, like, basically it's hate, right? He's pushing Trump, MAGA, right-wing hate. And he's, doing this. Someone who should have been canceled for his own anti-feminist, his misogynistic, racist, anti-liberal things that he did before he got his show. But he should have been canceled. I mean, I don't believe in canceling, but if anybody should have been censored, it was him, right? Because of, he hit for the cycle, right? He did blackface, he did misogynistic things with women. And I'm going to get into Kimmel's at the end of this thing. We're going to go back into Kimmel's, and I'm going to show you some of the ways he's just a deplorable person. I forgot about these things, the Tom Hanks, toddlers and tiaras thing, and then some of these other things that he did. He's just a bad person, right? And he's, he was on one side of the equation. He was, the kind of person he was before he would call a Trumper now, right? He would link his former self in with this group of people. But, he tried to do that with Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers saying, that's not true, right? But, to the dumbed down people who listen to these guys, and those people aren't of importance because, they're the first to go as the system collapses.
Okay, do whatever you want. Conspiracy theorists, that's fine. Because if you look at the track record of conspiracy theorists in the last few years, they've been right about a lot of things. So I don't care about that one. Anti-Semite, that was called, that's just like, this is their game plan. They use these words to cancel people, and they went and ran with this because it's the crazy anti-vaxxer wacko again, talking about, accusing somebody of being a pedophile. Like, of course, this is the game plan that they use. Incorrect, but that's the environment that we're in. There's a lot of people who have been captured by various, entities, government entities, whether we're talking about pharmaceutical industrial complex or whether we're talking about believing that the government has a best interest in mind and we're puppeting, various narratives. In the end, if you are not someone whose opinion aligns with the mainstream narrative, this is what they're going to do with you. And it's not me. I'm not a victim. I don't give a shit. Say whatever the hell you want about me. That's fine. Like the people that know me and love me, you know what I'm all about. My teammates know what I'm all about.
Most inspiring
I don't have,
teammate.
like,
Most
I've
inspiring
never
teammate, by the way.
mentioned.
Congratulations. Won an award in the middle of this whole thing for your teammates. Prima donna, obviously.
Some people puked because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw a guy cry.
But listen,
Saw a guy cry because you were named.
So I guess he got an award for his, on the Jets for, his coming back from his injury and, all that stuff.
And the most inspirational teammate.
Should we say?
That was not like joy,
Listen.
tears of joy.
I still, in the end, to sum this up, listen, I still haven't popped a bottle because there hasn't been any list that's come out. And I'm glad that Jimmy is not on the list. I really am. And I don't think he's the P word. And, I think it's impressive that a man who went to Arizona State and has 10 joke writers can read off a prompter. So, my education at JUCO and my 3 semesters at Cal that I'm very proud of has worked out for me, and I'm glad to see it's worked out for him as well. So I wish him.
The reason he went to a JUCO was that there wasn't anybody that wanted him in terms of Division I scholarships as a quarterback. And so it wasn't because of his grades. So Jimmy Kimmel, that was disinformation. That was lies that he put out, right? Jimmy Kimmel said he fact-checked these things. But Aaron Rodgers was smart. He did well in his SATs. He got into Cal, which is, got high standards. And he, it was only because nobody wanted him. He's turned out to be one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. But wherever he's coming out of high school, they didn't offer him a scholarship. So that's why he didn't go directly to a big university.
Him the best. Again, I don't give a shit what he says about me. But as long as he understands what I actually said and that I'm not accusing him of being on a list, then I'm all for moving forward.
And so then this happened, which, he goes after one of the vice presidents at ESPN.
I'm excited to hear if this is over now and we move along because it was on Today's Show this morning.
Nice.
Today's Show was like, Aaron's going to answer this afternoon. Stay tuned. I was like, all right, great to be a part of this.
How many of those people actually watched the clip, and how many people just saw a headline. I don't think Mike Foss watched the clip.
So Mike Foss, this is where they're getting stressed out.
I don't know who that is. But I'm like, Mike, I don't work for you, Mike.
I think
Okay.
you told. I don't know if maybe
What
it's
part of
how
his quote did you not like, Aaron? Which part of it did you not enjoy?
AJ, it's
Made a
like,
dumb and factually incorrect joke.
You thought it was a pretty smart, good one.
I mean, I feel like I made a statement about, not wanting to be on the list to come out, but
It was a callback.
It should never have happened.
Callback, thought, to February.
We all realized that in the moment. What are you talking about? Let's move on, man. Come on.
All right, we would like to let you know. Excited for you to meet Foss in person someday.
So pumped.
Foss right now is sitting on an airplane watching this. Just
Oh my! Probably took all his clothes off.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Oh, he's sweating. I assume. Yeah.
So Mike Foss. This is Mike Foss here. And, that's that guy. So then this guy on MSNBC, who is a sports commentator for football, Mike Florio.
I had to hear what Aaron Rodgers had to say in response to Jimmy Kimmel's monologue last night.
Aaron Rodgers playing word games when it comes to Jimmy Kimmel, which is the headline here. And again, they don't get it. I want to show you this clip here, then I'll explain this in a way that you guys will see it, but they won't, right?
I'm not going to go through the whole history. If you've been paying attention, and this is it in a nutshell. Just in a nutshell. Last week, Rodgers gratuitously implies that Jimmy Kimmel is on the Jeffrey Epstein client because
he didn't do that. Like, you can say he's lying now, which is what he's doing. But you don't know he did that. Like, that's not factual. You're supposed to be a reporter. There's an explanation. He didn't say Jimmy Kimmel, he was on the list, and that would be factual. He said something that you could interpret different ways. And, well, let's get into it. Let's let him finish up, and I'll switch over to voiceover.
The way Rodgers said it indicated that Jimmy Kimmel would be upset in some way once the list of his clients comes out. That's a given. He never specifically said Jimmy Kimmel's name's on the list. Never said that. Never said Jimmy Kimmel's a pedophile, but there's a lot implied when you say Jimmy Kimmel's going to be upset when the list
No, it's a lot that you guys took in a certain way.
Comes out, and I'm going to pop a bottle of something when it does. There's a history there between the two. That's established as well. So, Jimmy Kimmel was very upset about what Aaron Rodgers said. And
Jimmy Kimmel, who's been a complete piece of crap. I'm going to get into that. I'll show you more clips. I'm going to go through 3 phases of this video here.
Said so on X. New Year's resolution, call it X, not Twitter, X, or whatever. Just call it X. Created a storm within ESPN. Created a mess. Eventually, ESPN issued a statement calling it a dumb and unfortunate joke.
Again, only because Jimmy Kimmel cried like a little boop did any of this happen, right? Because it's internal to Disney. Jimmy Kimmel cried after being, a horrible person. And, oh my God, he's like, the way he whined, right? Otherwise, no one would have cared about this. It would have been sort of a nothing burger, right? It's Jimmy Kimmel's reaction and threatening litigation and crying and doing these things. And it all being internal to ESPN. We're going to get into Stephen A. Smith because he says it for what it is. These are his bosses, and they all pander to this thing, right?
Monday night, Jimmy Kimmel came after Rodgers aggressively in his monologue. And so today was the day Rodgers addressed it. Now, look, I've been all over the place with Rodgers over the past 15 years. And as the season started, I was rooting for the guy. I was making myself like the guy. Hard Knocks worked. I was willing to forget about all the stuff from the past.
What did he do? Like he didn't do anything, right? Rodgers didn't do anything in the past that you need to forget about. Like he did something to you or whatever. You might not like him as a player. You might agree with what he said. But him becoming a truther was because of you guys. You guys going after him because he didn't want to say, and he wasn't being deceptive. He just didn't want to say his choice because of the climate. No one wanted to say these things. Anybody out in the public eye did not want to say they didn't get the bloop because of the way they were being savaged. And, you made it sound like he was a truther looking to rile things up. And he got, slammed, and he explained himself on the Pat McAfee show. We'll get into that in a bit. And, it created more of this stuff where you guys ran with it and turned him into a villain because of your shilling for the big pharma. You guys are the villains. Big pharma is the villains. They have been for a while, right? Like, who hasn't had an issue with side effects? Who's taken some of these things, right? Over the years, I mean, we're going all the way, not even going that far back. I mean, fentanyl, right? And then all the things that have happened with the opioid crisis and all the other things that are there. And, this is, he's not the villain here, right?
Times he's been a conspiracy theorist, he's been disingenuous, he's been narcissistic, he's been manipulative.
Okay, every athlete's narcissistic. So you cover athletes all the time. You have to be narcissistic to be a pro athlete. It just goes with it, right? You have to be. Like, there has to be some narcissism. He has to be narcissism to do this, to doing what he's doing here, right? There has to be some of that. And so you don't have a real problem with that. Now, being a conspiracy theorist, again, he had his beliefs that he wasn't sharing with people. He wasn't out at social media sharing these things. It came out because you guys forced his hand because he ended up getting COVID. It got exposed that he didn't get the bloop, and you guys made a big deal about it, right? So be honest about these things because you're not. You're supposed to be a reporter, and you're not, right?
And this is kind of the way Kimmel put it last night. Just because you throw a football really well doesn't make you the smartest guy on the planet. And it doesn't imbue...
That's what you thought what Kimmel's good point was? Just because you are a shill comedian that's not funny but is willing to carry water for your corporate overlords in Disney doesn't make you the smartest guy either. Or you some guy who's commenting in his kitchen who's, getting the facts wrong, who's got a degree from somewhere and pretends to be a journalist. That doesn't make like it's just anybody can say that about anybody, right? You guys are all voicing your opinions. He gets to voice his. But this is about them not wanting those things to be said. And they have a way of dealing with them. Aaron Rodgers said things you're not supposed to say. And those things at the end and all that stuff about, and in the stuff he said about Big Pharma and all these things. And, now this is, he has to be demonized because of it, right? And censored and deplatformed.
You with all sorts of special abilities that you can become the guy that everyone turns to no matter what the situation is, just because you can throw a football really hard and really far and really long and really accurate. It doesn't make you a master of all things just because you're a master of throwing a football. So it's been a complicated relationship with PFT, me, and Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, as the season started, I was all in.
He's all in. He's all in. I'm all in.
I wanted to see it work. I wanted it to do well. I was upset for him and for the Jets when the Achilles tendon tear happened. But, unlike every other quarterback who suffers an early season injury, he didn't just go away and focus on rehab, recovery. Remember Tom Brady in 2008? Never heard a peep from him again for the rest of the
Okay, so the difference here is he went on the Pat McAfee show all of last year. And you guys turned this into a discussion where he started to make his views public, right? And they mocked him for doing new age things, like he did a dark retreat, some kind of meditative thing. He goes and does different things that are, not mainstream things. And you guys have covered it and have mocked him for it. And so you made him into this thing. And so he's, voiced his opinion, which is an opinion that's not allowed to be voiced, a censored opinion. That you guys are scared like it's Voldemort to you guys when somebody, Kyrie Irving and these people come out and say these things that aren't allowed to be said because you're pharmaceutical overlords that run MSNBC and CNN and ESPN and Disney and these things, a financial relationship with Big Pharma.
The season, week 1, after a historic 18-1 season, undefeated, lost to the Giants. Comebacks week 1.
Tom Brady's the best. He's not a conspiracy theorist.
Comes back week 1.
All right, so you know this guy, right? But him saying plain word salad. Let me go to a voiceover, then I'll come back and get more video here. See, here's something that he should know and competitive people should know. And I showed you the clip. Now, this is the third video I've made on this, this thing with Kimmel's. And in the last video, I showed you the clip with Pat McAfee where Aaron Rodgers said, him being right and Kimmel being wrong was a win. And when you win something in sports, you pop a bottle of champagne. And so Aaron Rodgers has been in a adversarial relationship with these mainstream media shills, and he's recently said that they should all put up their bloop status before, when they talk about him. So what these guys have done to their own bodies. And also, really, they should put up who sponsors their shows and the company that they work for. Because Big Pharma has a stranglehold, like some of these big corporations, on these mainstream media giants, right? These mainstream media giants have financial relationships with corporations, and so they don't go after those corporations, right? Like they're paying them, in a sense, protection money from journalism. And so this is what we're dealing with here, right? And so Aaron Rodgers was saying that, that being right, and you guys know this as truthers, the only thing that we ever get out of these, interactions or these conflicts with mainstream media people and our relatives and other people in our lives that we argue with, I don't, but you do. Like I don't argue with people. I don't care, right? The only thing we get out of it is being right most of the time or all the time. That when the dust settles, we're right and they're wrong. But they never give that to you. They never, even if they kind of admit you're right, there's been people who have admitted, the idea of this, conspiracy theorists being right isn't out there. What happens is they just move the goalpost to something else, or they, attack you for something, a little detail here or there. But Aaron Rodgers was right and Jimmy Kimmel was wrong about all of these other things. And so when he said he doesn't want this list to come out, is because Jimmy Kimmel denied that there was ever a list, and he mocked Aaron Rodgers for it. So Aaron Rodgers saying when the list came out, it would be embarrassment for Jimmy Kimmel, it would be another loss for him and a win for Aaron Rodgers. And he's competitive because he's an athlete, and so is Kimmel's, right? When you're in a battle about something like this, you guys know. And so maybe Aaron Rodgers was using word salad. Maybe he was originally intending something else. But his story makes sense, right? Based on the other things that he said. He wasn't saying that he was on the list. I mean, you can't prove he was saying that. And his story makes sense. And anybody else, they would, anything else where it would be, not somebody you're trying to demonize, they would take that, the way that Jimmy Kimmel allowed Hunter Biden to explain his way out of corruption and all these things and crack addiction on his show. He gave him a free pass on everything. And his story didn't add up at all, right? And the computer laptop came out later. He basically went on Kimmel and, the laptop stuff he didn't address and own up to, but then they owned up to it later. And so just yesterday, there was a video that came out that Kimmel was saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene lost it when Hunter Biden made a surprise. Hunter Biden went into the House of Representatives and they were doing a hearing on him, and he was being Hunter Biden, and he stormed out when Marjorie Taylor Greene started to talk, and Kimmel was giving him a free pass on that, right? And they give Tom Brady a free pass on cheating and all these other things that he did. Tom Brady cheated at his job. He was deflating footballs, and there was these text messages from the equipment guys on the Patriots who were saying, Brady better give me some memorabilia or he'll be throwing balloons on Sunday, which is great. Like, Cuddy, could you hear it in that sort of Boston accent, right? So they wanted these things like signed autographed things that they could sell from Brady, like footballs and things. And so they would do what he wanted, which was deflate the footballs, which was illegal. And so they got caught. They got caught cheating multiple times, the Patriots. Bill Belichick, he's retiring now. and they got caught cheating. Aaron Rodgers didn't get caught cheating. Aaron Rodgers is one of the smartest quarterbacks in terms of manipulating the game and his snap count and using his cadence and reading defenses and, managing these things. Again, showing a high proclivity towards intelligence, right? But they don't give him credit for that. And they're saying that he said what they think he said, when he clearly has a better explanation that makes sense. And maybe he's lying, but you can't prove that. And his other explanation makes just as much sense. And it's based in something these clowns don't understand is all we get is that we're right. For all the hassle we get from people, from all the ways that we're demonized as truthers, the thing that we get out of it is we end up being right. And so they don't understand that because they're wrong, and they find ways that we're always wrong because they can't admit they're right because they're financially, incentivized to demonize us no matter what. And so, we get these victories that we get. You'll never admit to losing. You'll never admit to being wrong. You'll never admit that you're wrong all the time and we're right all the time, right? They'll never do that. And Jimmy Kimmel was saying that everybody's on the list, who was Bill Clinton, is a pedo, right? That if Aaron Rodgers is accusing him of being a pedo, which he wasn't. Even if Aaron Rodgers was accusing him of being on the list, does that mean everyone on the list knew what Jeffrey Epstein was doing? And then he brought in Donald Trump, but didn't bring in Bill Clinton because he's completely skewed and owned politically in every other possible way. And this is something these guys won't acknowledge. Aaron Rodgers won. He won all these things. He's right about all these things. And he's far more honest and more sincere and authentic than any of these other clowns. Okay, from there, I saw this on the New York Post, and maybe somebody sent me this, or I just saw it myself, but Aaron Rodgers off the Pat McAfee show for the rest of the season. Now, I had thought that, at the end of the football season, Aaron Rodgers would be off anyway. I didn't know it would be this week, but maybe he'd stay on for the playoffs. He's going to go on vacation like most football players do. The Jets season is over. But the way that it was framed by the mainstream media was Aaron Rodgers cut from the Pat McAfee show for the rest of the season. Aaron Rodgers kicked off for the Pat McAfee show, Inside Edition. Aaron Rodgers out of the Pat McAfee show. And the way that they put this here is that he got kicked off for what he said about Kimmel's and his response and what he said about the ESPN executives, right? But he was probably going to leave anyway. And Pat McAfee, to his own stupidity, didn't make that clear and didn't thank Aaron Rodgers. And, there's a little bit of a history here. Let me just show you a few more things, and I'll show you the Pat McAfee thing. Here's the various headlines here as well. There's that. And then here at The Guardian, it says, ESPN paid $85 million to air Aaron Rodgers' conspiracy theories. And there's that. So that's what they paid the Pat McAfee show, right? And then there's this meme that came out because Pat McAfee ends up looking like he's cheering them getting rid of Aaron Rodgers. And I'll show you all that in a second. And so this meme came out too soon. And it's, they put up Pat McAfee's face on Travis Kelce for the Pfizer ad. Because, Pat McAfee got $85 million and some of that's Pfizer money. And it's all ESPN Disney money. And we know all about Disney, right? And so, he was pressured to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. So before I show you the Pat McAfee thing, I want to do a little bit of a voiceover here that'll, to save me some time in the editing process. But to understand this, Pat McAfee went from, and I know this because Pat McAfee ended up being outed by New York Post for paying Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, paying Aaron Rodgers. And so Pat McAfee defended himself by saying Aaron Rodgers is a big part of the reason that the Pat McAfee show went from being valued at $5 million to being valued at $500 million. And now he's got an $86 million deal with ESPN. ESPN and Disney that was firing people, that was laying off good people that worked there and bringing in Pat McAfee. And Pat McAfee represents the enemy, right? But I'm going to show you something from Stephen A. Smith, who has his own YouTube channel now, right? Because we know with Joe Rogan and the podcasters, everyone has a podcast now. Meghan Markle has a podcast, right? Everyone wants a podcast. Everyone wants a piece of this podcast money. And alternative media, YouTube channels and things like this. Everybody's doing that because people don't watch mainstream news anymore, TV shows, and they get their information from the internet. And they don't even know, young people don't even know about these networks, CNN and MSNBC. We grew up with, Walter Cronkite and these guys in suits telling us, what was going on, people in my generation. But these kids grow up getting all their information from YouTube and people like them. And so Pat McAfee's show is far exceeding ESPN in its viewership. So they brought Pat McAfee on. He does college football Saturdays. And they got a bunch of old guys there that are aging out. They're going to retire. Some of them are like walking corpses. They do a game day for college football. And now they have Pat McAfee coming on and doing some of his goofy stuff there on ESPN. Pat McAfee was a former punter, but kind of a big guy who, would tackle and, do things that other punters wouldn't. He's more of a, sort of a thug as a punter. And then he developed this successful show. And one of his major assets that he had Aaron Rodgers on every Tuesday. Aaron Rodgers has a brilliant football mind. And sometimes when I'm eating lunch, the Pat McAfee show will be on. And it's Tuesday, I'll watch a little bit, while I'm eating lunch. I've watched it maybe, 5-6 times. Every time I've watched it, it's been, excellent football analysis. And I don't really care about that. But Aaron Rodgers, explains things in a way that he is probably, that has the greatest football quarterback mind in terms of playing the position. He was talking about this with Dak Prescott. The difference between just going out there and winging it and, reading the game and reading the defenses and in terms of manipulating they have a cadence when they hike the football. They have these very complex plays. If you watch the show of the quarterback, they need to be able to memorize things and remember these plays. And it's a very complex position. And it's, they have to make decisions within 2 seconds. You have to get rid of the ball between 2 and 5 seconds before they get crushed by these guys who want to, big giant guys who are now, fast and vicious, who are trying to, kill the quarterback, right? And so Aaron Rodgers was talking about the cadence. Aaron Rodgers has been known for years for drawing the other team off sides by using his cadence to make them think they're snapping the ball when they're not. Also, when the other team is trying to get players off of the field, Aaron Rodgers will get up to the line quickly and snap the ball and catch the other team with 12 men on the field, getting extra yards for his team, doing things like this, right? And Dak Prescott started to use this, here we go. He started to say this, here we go, like you could hear it when he was snapping the ball. And Aaron Rodgers talked about that, what that meant and what kind of, things that they say or whatever as a flow to get the team, ready for the snap and whatever, right? And so a quarterback does a lot of things that Aaron Rodgers points out the nuances, right? And so mostly what he would be on the show for was talking sophisticated football things. And they loved having him on the show. But also, the big part of the draw for Pat McAfee, when Aaron Rodgers was getting called out by these mainstream media shills, he would go on the Pat McAfee show and he would defend himself and he would talk about these things and tell the truth about what was actually happening. And so when a story would break about Aaron Rodgers, people would wait for Aaron Rodgers to go on Pat McAfee's show, and that was a big part of why Pat McAfee's show increased in value. And Pat McAfee alluded to this, and he said this right out. That's one of the reasons he gave Aaron Rodgers money. Aaron Rodgers didn't want money. He was coming on the show for free. But Pat McAfee said, look, we've made a lot of money because of you, so we want to, pay you some money for being on the show, whatever that was, right? And so, we're talking about millions of dollars. And the deal with ESPN, ESPN wanted these kind of shows because they're getting their ass kicked. That's why all these guys, Don Lemon's going to Twitter, right? And Chris Cuomo went, is doing his own certain thing or whatever it was. He went to this alternative network. But these guys who used to be on mainstream media are going to these other, going to stuff they used to criticize. because they're getting their ass kicked, right? We're winning, they're losing. ESPN knows it. So ESPN was laying off traditional journalists so they could bring in Pat McAfee at $86 million. And a big part of this was this, conspiratorial talk that Aaron Rodgers brought, and that brought all kinds of interest into Pat McAfee and what ESPN wanted, right? They wanted this stuff, but they want to, whitewash it, right? Because they can't have Aaron Rodgers slamming their sponsor and Pfizer and these other people, right? This other stuff that's going on. It's okay for Jimmy Kimmel to take shots at Aaron Rodgers, but it's not okay for Aaron Rodgers to come back at him and come back at the ESPN producers that misquoted him. He was misquoted, and he knows what he said and why he said it, and they don't. And that's the reality. And they can say they know more. Yeah, sure. But it's clear that Aaron Rodgers has a reasonable explanation. So Pat McAfee comes on and celebrates Aaron Rodgers not being on the show anymore after all Aaron Rodgers has done for him. And Pat McAfee took a beating. Like, he got denutted by his ESPN executives, and he took a beating because what his show's all about, is being compromised now because of his, this conflict that's gone on. And I'll show you this in a moment. But, I saw this with, is it Cenk, whatever his name is, from the Young Turks. Like, there's a guy who does the Sajmarg meditation, now Heartfulness, they used to be friends with, and he looks just like this guy. He's Lebanese, and, these guys are Turkish, but they, look very similar. But this guy, Cenk Yayangar, whatever his name is, from the Young Turks, and again, I know people hate the Young Turks here because they're ultra-liberal, but they are, internet show, right? And this guy, Cenk, whatever his name is, he went on to MSNBC. And his show and his presence there brought in lots of people, lots of young people, a demographic that MSNBC and everybody else wants. But at some point, he said he went in and they had a conversation with him. And they said, you can't say these things because they have a very narrow bandwidth. And these things that he's saying are what drawing people to it. So he agreed to part ways with them, even though he wasn't very successful. And, the guy, he's not very likable, whatever, but, for truthers, he's hyper-liberal, but, he's on the other side of this thing in terms of the conservative truthers and things like this. But he, he talked about the conversation, and this is where, they have a way of going about it to censor you, but not, say these words, they do it in a more subtle way. And that's what's happening to Pat McAfee, right? You got $86 million, largely because of your relationship with Aaron Rodgers and these, these shows you did with him, but now you got to get rid of them. Like, this is how they roll there, right? This is ABC Disney. And so they take the, the part that makes the show interesting and they get rid of it, right? And they try to dumb it down and clean it up because they have a very narrow bandwidth of things you can say. And if you go after any of their corporate sponsors or the networks themselves and you tell the truth, then you're out. And this is how it is. Like, this is why you don't go and connect with these groups, because they're never going to include your truth, the truth, or something closer to the truth, because these networks are about disinformation and dishonesty and keeping the illusion going, right? There's no truthers there. They can't have you on there. So, like, there's no reason to want to be on there. Like, if you want to go on there, they give you a lot of money, you're selling out, right? You're being denutted. And this is Pat McAfee getting denutted.
So Aaron Rodgers Tuesday, season 4 is done.
Yeah.
Complete this season.
There's going to be a lot of people that are happy with that, myself included, to be honest, with the way it ended.
Okay, so see what he's acknowledging there, which I didn't understand first, but I thought about it because I knew that Aaron Rodgers and these football players go like to, they go on vacation in the off season, so he wasn't going to be available. Maybe he could call in, but I didn't think he was on during the off season of football, and he might have been on during the playoffs, right? But he's acknowledging that the season's over. This is Wednesday, the day after what happened with Aaron Rodgers and going after ESPN, producer, that guy Voss or whatever his name is, right? And so them applauding this makes it look like they're, wanting Aaron Rodgers gone. And Pat McAfee doesn't help by what he's about to say here, right? But he said a lot of people will be happy about this. And really, what he's saying is a lot of influential, important shills like Jimmy Kimmel's and people on ABC, and he's going to talk about all the people that have gone after his show because it's not, he's not part of their club, and these guys are getting their asses kicked by people like Pat McAfee on the podcast world, right? The so-called new media. And so most people like to listen to Aaron Rodgers or like the conflict and don't really care. Like they're not Jimmy Kimmel fans, right? All these things.
Ended. It got real loud. And real loud. I'm happy that is not going to be my mentions going forward, which is great news. We always, and this is legit, and I think I'm never going to act like people are out to get people.
Sure.
But
why wouldn't you? Because people are out to get people all the time. What are you talking about? This world is now kind of governed by hate. Like there's just so much hate out there. But people are going after people all the time. You live in you play a sport where these football players are trying to kill the quarterback and kill each other. I mean, it's a violent, warlike game. And all the weapons and, there's people trying to destroy people every day. People in divorces, people in personal lives, people in governments, corporations. There's so much competition out there, so much hate. Why would you say that, right? And of course, there is a competition in the world of media between the so-called new media and, truthers and, people in podcasts and people in alternative media and the old school media that's literally, their audience is literally dying right now in front of them, right?
throughout my life, there's been a lot of people that have definitely wanted to see me not do good because I'm an uber confident human being, loud. And if I think you're trying to hold me or my guys back, like I'm an asshole too. Certainly have zero, don't need you. Hey, what are you? Nothing. Sweet. See ya. Keep it moving. So there were some people, especially when...
He's no rocket scientist, right? So he has trouble articulating these things. But unfortunately, he didn't make it clear that Aaron Rodgers was a big part of his show. Like he's talking about, he doesn't like the drama. But the drama is what created his show the way it is, right? You know, and he's an ESPN employee, and he got the bloop. I don't know if he signed in after that. Like, I don't know what his status is. But, these ESPN employees all have to get it, right? There was a woman. ESPN Allison Williams explains why she's giving up her job over a bloop mandate. Now, this was a woman who, basically begged ESPN, pregnant woman, to allow her to keep her job and not get the bloop, and they said no. Disney was mandatory. Now, again, Pat McAfee might have signed up afterwards, but that's how Disney rolls, right? And we'll get into this with Stephen A. Smith because he chimed in on this. But Stephen A. Smith said that, when he was covering Kyrie Irving, that he was going to get it because, and he had some questions about it. He wasn't, psyched about it, but he wanted his $8 million a year, which is the highest paid, person of like a pundit that's out there. And it's all about the money and the, Disney. This is the evil Disney, right?
I negotiate my own deal here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole business there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Couple jobs.
A lot of connections, a lot of stuff like that. See ya. Hey, I'm running my show.
Oh, yeah.
I keep my creative rights. Okay, 100%. Who's gonna create me and my guys? That's how this. That's a whole nother.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole nother entire profession. No, con man, you could just keep your sound effects to yourself.
Okay.
In this exact moment, that's a whole nother profession. People, a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you got this group here,
Mm-hmm.
and then we've cut the line too a lot, because this is supposed to be like a union where you just kind of wait for others and you go. So then you got like that group, right?
He's talking about the complications that he now has because he's associated with ESPN, which he shouldn't have been, right? Because as soon as he's going to be censored. Like he's already been censored, and this is about all these things, and whether Aaron Rodgers comes back on the show next year or whatever happens with all of that, right? And, he kind of backed Aaron Rodgers, but not really.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So going in, we knew that we potentially ruffled some feathers in about 3 to 5 professions that have a lot of power and a lot of say. And we understood it. We completely understood it. I appreciated it. I have a lot of respect for a lot of agents. There's a lot of horrendous horseshit ones, though, that somehow get by. And they kind of make the good agents look bad, by the way. So that is just that whole thing. This whole thing, I don't believe in any of them. Like, I don't, like the middle management producers that run shows and stuff and create headlines and ideas and stuff, none of them have.
See, what he's talking about here is control, right? That he is, he bypassed the financial people, the agents and the gatekeepers there, to negotiate his own deal with ESPN. And then he negotiated the ability to keep the creative rights with ESPN, right? And these people didn't like him in the first place because it's not traditional journalism that they're doing there, but they need him and other people. Again, this is with Disney and ESPN laying off people, some of them great at their job, because they're broke and they're hurting financially, because they're getting their asses kicked by the new media, right? And so this is what this is all about. This is this conflict, and the truth telling that goes on now because of individual people having the ability to do what I do here, right? And this is them trying to bring that into their fold, but then control it. And this is what happens.
Have a lot of respect for me. I don't have a lot of respect for them, which is why I'm like, don't put us up for the Emmys. Don't want to be an Emmy person, because these are the humans that are voting on them. Mm-hmm. Now, through our times, I've found like 3 to 4 of these people that are good at their jobs and creative and fun. Most of them, though, just kind of very, this type of thing. So don't really get along with much of them. And then all these people that think we jump line and we don't deserve it, like those people have hated us since we were on the internet. I have a lot of respect for them and their hustle and their grind, but they
no, you don't.
They were going to be against us forever. And we knew that. I knew that coming into this. And over the last week, we have certainly given them all a lot of stuff to get mad about and become loud about. We have messed up in that particular aspect. And by we, I mean, we're a conversation show. People are having conversations. We live in a country that has freedom.
You didn't mess up, right? Because the majority of people are interested in this. They like drama. And Aaron Rodgers has far more passion on the support side than, there's not that many people that just, they might dislike their truther relatives and things like this. But truthers are not as disliked by, the majority of people as they are by the media and people like Jimmy Kimmel, right? And Jimmy Kimmel has no following. Jimmy Kimmel, a little whiner, right, who's done all these things like, I'm going to set in on him at the end of this thing, and he's going to, all the stuff about the evil stuff that he's been involved with, right?
Of speech, but also you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your freedom of speech. So what I'm saying is we've given a lot of people who...
No, there's no consequences for them for Jimmy Kimmel. Like Jimmy Kimmel, blackface twice, misogynistic behavior towards women, having girls fish around in his pocket, which I showed you in my last video. Young girls, one of them he was asking to know if she was of age, 18, right? And they were searching for something in his pants that he had in his pocket, which was, creepy, and going up behind that girl and making sexual gestures. I'll show you that again at the end of this thing. So there was that, right? That was Jimmy Kimmel stuff. And then, the things that I'm going to show you with all the stuff that he's done since then that's evil. And then he can go after people like Trump and say things, salacious things, slander people, say things that are false, brutal jokes, right, that he tells. And then when he gets some of it back, somebody's in a debate with, in a conflict with, and he whines like a little girl. And then he's, and then that's what you're going to answer to, right? When he should be condemned after the way he serviced Hunter Biden. He's put up with the, senile president, and he should have his comedian card revoked for not going in on those clowns, right? Because that's funny. That's stuff he should be doing comedy, but they're just shills. They're all shills, right? And so this is fundamentally dishonest. He's saying that all these people, it's a few people with power who can't, realize that their world is ended, right? Their control is over, and they can't control this kind of media, and they're trying to save their channels and Disney by bringing in alternative media, but then they denut these people like this guy, and and they make it unwatchable.
Been waiting for us to fail. A lot of ammo and things to attack us for over the last week, and we would love to get back to the point where we just move on and continue to silence all the haters over here who can't negotiate as good as I can, all the people over here who can't create a show as good as us, and all the people up here who are just going to always be here, and they're going to hustle and do their thing, which I respect, but we need to do that, and that is our...
Or you could just go to Spotify and something like that, get a even a bigger deal, and you could go anywhere, because ESPN doesn't mean anything. This is a YouTube channel he's got here, right? Even Stephen A. Smith is branching out to YouTube. All these guys are, because they realize that's where the future is. You go to Spotify, you get a deal somewhere else. You'll get the same deal. You don't have to put up with ESPN's BS and censorship. And then Aaron Rodgers can say whatever he wants, and then you don't have to worry about it. It'll just draw more attention and help your channel grow. And you'll be, more valued by people who are consciously superior and more intellectually developed than anybody who would ever watch Jimmy Kimmel or this crap that they put up on ESPN.
Our focus, that is our goal. And Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. He's a 4-time MVP. He's a massive piece of the NFL story. Whenever you go back and tell it, he will be a huge part of it. We are very lucky to get a chance to chat with him and learn from him. Some of his thoughts and opinions, though, do piss off a lot of people.
Not a lot of people. They don't piss off a lot of people. Like what about all the people that are happy with his opinion? A lot of opinions that anybody puts out there, Kimmel's puts out there. He's pissing off a lot of people, right? He's getting chased around all over the place. So Kimmel, when Aaron Rodgers said this, Kimmel said there's people that are coming to his house and talking to his mailman and his wife and things. He's pissed off a lot of people, right? His battle with Aaron Rodgers cost him. You get into this thing, and people have fans, right? And the fans go after you. And so, there's lots of people. There's lots of people who are truthers. When do we count, right? We're 1/3 of the frickin' population, right? There's... a huge population are so-called conspiracy theorists. When do we count, right? What about all the Trumpers and people? They don't count? Jimmy Kimmel's pissed off all these Trumpers. But he can say what he says because Trumpers don't count, right, for your crappy ESPN Disney. He's heard this is Republicans shouldn't go to Disney at all. Republicans should boycott everything Disney. Everything ESPN, Marvel, all this crap. With the feminist liberal agenda they're pushing, they've pissed off more people than Aaron Rodgers did, and more passionate people, more informed people. And so what are you talking about, right? The people that matter to you or people that you think are important, they're nothing. You could go somewhere else. If you have such a great show, Spotify or anybody, if you have viewership, they'll follow you wherever, right? And I don't know what he's getting ratings-wise on ESPN. This video alone has 500,000 views. Well, a big part of that is the Aaron Rodgers thing. And this is not the only place where he said this, right? He has his own platform. So he put this out in various places, and he's getting millions upon millions of views. He had a big audience, and Aaron Rodgers will draw people in. And so, what are you apologizing for?
And I'm pumped that is no longer going to be every single Wednesday of my life, which it has been for the last few weeks. On Friday, obviously, I threw us into the fire as well. Forever stand by that. Everything else, though, just can't do that and not what we want to be known for. And I'm also pumped that I don't have to do these types of talks anymore. So with that being said, sports are alive right now.
Yep.
There's so much.
We're back there. So, the way he handled that was moronic. I'm sure he's going to have to talk about this today because there are now memes out there where he's just punked himself with all these people, truthers, and it's a big audience, a big part of his potential audience, a big part of the the movement, and he just denuded himself, and it seems like Aaron Rodgers was going to stop appearing on a show anyway, but the way he handled that was horrible, and he's catering to the people who aren't his audience, right? But anyways, let's go to Stephen A. Smith here. Okay, so before we do that, I finished this video, and then I was going shopping and took the dogs for a walk, and I ended up watching a little bit more of the Stephen Smith show, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt when I shouldn't have. So I got more to cover on that. Then they recommended me another Jimmy Kimmel video in the Jimmy Kimmel section that I'm slamming him. And then I recorded the Pat McAfee show, waiting to see if Aaron Rodgers would be addressed because I knew he was taking a lot of a beating, which he had admitted to eventually. So they started off covering Bill Belichick's retirement for about an hour. It started off with Bill Belichick's press conference at noon, and then that's when Pat McAfee's show begins. And then they segued into Pete Carroll and Nick Saban. And so that took up 2 hours of his show. But then out of the woods somewhere, Aaron Rodgers appeared. And Aaron Rodgers talked about his interactions with Bill Belichick. And after Aaron Rodgers left, he addressed what happened. So let me show you that here.
It's nice. Good books to actually read behind me. So we're not doing that darkness thing anymore.
Smart. Well, I appreciate you. Ladies, get back to it. We appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Rodgers.
What's he doing in the woods?
Bro,
What's he doing on
I tried to reach out.
He's not allowed on the show. He can't come on the show.
I was told.
Yeah, we must have called the wrong person. Zita's not here.
Fake.
Yeah, that was the whole thing.
Deep fake. Is that a clone?
Deep fake.
They got cloned.
So they're kind of mocking truthers there. He's going to get into the beating he took from the internet. But the way he's handled this is horrible. You know, he gave this big speech about how hard it is. He's going to talk about that again here. He's going to blame Aaron Rodgers again a little bit here as well. But again, he made the guy's show. I mean, he's responsible for a big part of the guy's show. And they all wanted this, right? People other than Aaron Rodgers, and they all pushed for it. I'll get into that in a moment. But the people who watch his show that are into alternative media, that's his real audience. And those are people who obviously like Aaron Rodgers. That's why they like the show. That's part of why they like the show. And they didn't like the way he treated him and how he caved, right? And he caved in a way that, you know, he should have addressed it and said, you know, he's always been a great guest or whatever. And, you know, because Aaron Rodgers didn't do anything wrong. Like, that's the problem. There's nothing that he did that he should be canceled for, other than, you know, I mean, go against the ESPN shill aspect of their, you know, what they're doing here.
Some of us know that, like, Aaron was. This is what offseason looked like for Aaron when football ends. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is what. Where's he at? Central America.
Yeah,
sure. Hungary.
Likes to travel. He talks about his love of travel, right?
Yeah, but it's not just travel too. It's just like, hey, I don't know what phone is.
Yeah. Free scaling mount. Face of a cliff.
Alex Honnold. It's like, does it, like, you know?
He was out buying those cool crystals last year. So.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that. I mean, there was a lot of everything. We've heard the stories.
Enlightenment, all the time, right? Enlightenment, awakening.
Bingo.
So Aaron's in the woods somewhere, and he couldn't, really didn't have access to internet. He just kind of heard that Bill Belichick had retired, and then he gave some stories of his interactions with Bill Belichick, and they brought him back on, again, after they covered everything else. They didn't get to take care of this at the beginning of the show, but there's a massive amount of people that are, you know, pissed at Pat McAfee, and, you know, again, that's his audience. Like, yeah, these other people are, you know, your bosses now, but your audience is what you need. Like, you know, like, your audience is, and again, you know, I mean, if he was telling his audience the truth and they didn't like it, then, you know, I'm all for that. That's what I do that here. People leave, whatever. But not respecting your audience, you know, the views of your audience, and caving to people who are not your audience and not your fans. You already talked about how there's all these people who want to cancel him. And Stephen A. Smith talked about this as well. I'll get into that in a moment. Let's let this finish up here.
And he's on a constant pursuit, seemingly, whenever the season ends. That's like that's his thing. So yesterday, I'm just getting absolutely crushed. I'm like, how do I explain to all these humans that, like, Aaron Rodgers has an off season too? Yeah, he, like, enjoys doing. And this,
you know, you mishandled this way worse than Aaron Rodgers did when he said this thing about Jimmy Kimmel. Like, Aaron Rodgers could have clarified his comment, and I don't think he wanted to. He doesn't need to. But you didn't clarify the way you said it and the way the media ran with it. You know, the same thing that you're, you know, not, he's kind of going to end up throwing Aaron under the bus here. The same thing you were throwing Aaron under the bus here is what happened to you because you mishandled the communication of this thing, right? He, you know, said these things in a way that it sounded like Aaron Rodgers was done on his show. And even Stephen A. Smith and these other people at ESPN were like, we don't know if Aaron will ever come back on his show, right? or it'll be allowed back, because that's the kind of pressure that was being exerted, and like that's why you're getting killed, because it looked like you caved, and you did in whatever way, and then you're coming back and you're not explaining to your audience that's your real audience. Like ESPN might fire you, but your audience will stick with you at Spotify and these other places, right? You have a bunch of people that watch your show, and those people are, at least truth or adjacent, many of them. And, they're coming to you because of the Aaron Rodgers thing. And you should find out what percentage of your audience is, on board with what Aaron's saying, right? That's why you bring them on, because there's people that watch your show that are into that.
This is how this is always kind of gone with Aaron Rodgers Tuesday. When his football's over, normally he's got, now last year a little different because the whole situation that was kind of taking place, but it's like, that was wild. We were getting absolutely killed. They're like, you turned your back on Aaron Rodgers. It's like, do you know how many things I've been through with Aaron Rodgers just in our short relationship? It's like, I was not pumped to be in the middle of any of that. We all have friends that put us in situations where we're like, did we have to? Did we? Did we? I've been that guy.
This one's a bit unique. Yeah, unique situation. It feels like.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so, today, whenever, and he's at the, I don't even want to explain anymore. He had to go up he had to go up a hill pretty much.
Yeah, you gotta find some service.
Anyways.
Whenever I've seen him on Pat McAfee, they're always egging him on with questions. They're always psyched that Aaron brings this up because it's brought people's attention to the Pat McAfee show. And now he's got this big deal at ESPN. Even, with that, they were still egging him on a little bit last time he talked. And they could say they weren't, but they were, right? He's saying it's a lot of headaches, but, he's not responsible for what Aaron Rodgers says, first of all. And what Aaron Rodgers said, none of it was that bad. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel is a whiner, a hypocrite, and a complete, and he's gone after Trump and so many people savagely, and not gone after other people that deserved, like Hunter Biden or whatever. Even today he's doing that, right? And so he has no business whining about what he's whined about. Like he's he can dish it out, but he can't take it. So him whining about that should have no credibility. He should be getting hammered for whining about it across the board. Like he's not a man. Like he's, that's not a man. Somebody who's does this stuff all the time and then whines about it when people do it to him. And he's even threatening litigation, which he wouldn't win anyway. Like it's just ridiculous. But he knows it was part of the same network, and so he put Pat McAfee in a bad place, and he wants Pat McAfee to censor him, right? Jimmy Kimmel, who doesn't want to be canceled for his misdeeds of blackface and these other things that he did, so many things that are cancelable, that other people have been canceled for, wants the ESPN to cancel, put pressure on Pat McAfee, so Aaron Rodgers can't go on his show and defend himself. So he wants to take shots at Aaron Rodgers, but doesn't want to get it back when it comes back to him, right? And so there's that aspect. So that's doesn't mean anything. What Aaron Rodgers said wasn't offensive only to Pfizer and the people who are pushing the mainstream story, who now, even Fauci, there's some article or headline that came up yesterday. I didn't get a chance to look at it, but apparently he's now saying that the 6 feet, the safe distancing that they have, whatever that was called, I can't remember, when you're supposed to be 6 feet away, wasn't based on science. Like he's saying that now. And, and again, I didn't read the article, but whatever, it alludes to something like that. He went to the Senate and did hearings again. And so, the story has fallen apart, whether they want to admit it or not. And we were right and they were wrong. And I got into that before, right? And so, for Pat McAfee to say he's got all these headaches and, well, the way the only real headache you have is somebody that, you're lucky to have on your show and helped give you a huge boost is somebody you should be backing. And it looked like you bailed on him, which you did. And even now you're throwing him under the bus and saying he gave you all kinds of headaches. Like that's ridiculous, right? You wanted to cover those things, and Aaron Rodgers gets to say these things. Someplace, right? There should be a platform for him to say things that are not, he isn't yelling fire in a crowded theater. The things he was saying were considered dangerous because of the propaganda they put out about the boop and COVID and all these things. This stuff that they put out that has turned out not to be true, and that they embellished these things and took away people's freedom of speech for something that wasn't threatening like they said. So later on, I listened to Stephen A. Smith. I'm going to show you a bit here that I first listened to, but then I listened to more later. It was hard to get through because he's kind of hard to listen to. He's such a blowhard. But he addressed the Pat McAfee stuff and said there are people at ESPN gunning for Pat McAfee. And he says to those people, why do you want him to fail? Because this new business model where Pat McAfee has his own show and he has to pay his staff, and because ESPN and Disney, Stephen A. Smith was addressing this, laid off all these people because there's, more to this. There's salaries that they have to, keep these people going, the overheads for the cost and the cost of the show and the staffing of the show, where Pat McAfee pays his own people, but he gets a deal and they just don't have to worry about the liability and all these things, right? He's an independent contractor, which a lot of people are going to go to in terms of the media world. And Stephen A. Smith says we should want him to succeed because it's an opportunity for us to build our own empire and be in control of our own content, right? And he acknowledged all these things, right? But either way, Pat McAfee is going to be fine as long as he doesn't piss off his audience, which he did in a very foolish way. And he didn't handle it well again, the second thing. Acknowledge that your audience, the majority of them, side with Aaron Rodgers, or they would have left you long ago, right? They're here because they're sympathetic to Aaron Rodgers. And that's the kind of people you're attracting to your audience, and those people have value, and their value, even though people don't want to admit it, they're a demographic, and they have, financial, a financial clout. All of us, right? So let's get into the Stephen A. Smith stuff here. So this is a Stephen A. Smith podcast responding to Jason Whitlock.
There's a few things going on in the world of sports that need to be addressed, but on this particular day, they don't take precedent. Instead, one would be Aaron Rodgers and his situation with the Pat McAfee show. That's necessary to address because, after all, I'm an employee for ESPN. The other would be...
He's going to say that over and over again. That's what I'm going to show you here.
A fat bastard that has gotten away for far too long talking his bullshit. You wanted some? Fine. I'm happy to give it to you, you piece of shit. The Stephen A. Smith show up next.
Okay, so that person he's talked about is Jason Whitlock, who is an African-American conservative sports commentator who kind of destroys Stephen A. Smith for being, a shill and whatever it is, right? And Stephen A. Smith is finally responding to him, and it got 700,000 views. That's the kind of stuff drama like this brings in, right? I don't know, his normal show doesn't get anything like this. So you see here, this is 2 days ago. This one gets 8,000 views, 33,000 views, 7,000 views, 40,000 views, right? Do you understand he got so many more views because he's responding to this drama? So he's going to go and insult this guy, Jason Whitlock, a little bit. But then he's going to be talking about working for ESPN.
Before I do that, it's necessary for me because I'm the face of ESPN, and obviously there's a lot of things that went on this week in regards to Pat McAfee and some of the news that he made with his show. And obviously Aaron Rodgers was one of those things.
So he just said that he went on this big rant about Jason Whitlock. And he said he's going to say some rough things about Jason Whitlock, and he had to call his pastor to apologize ahead of time for what he was about to say. And he says, "You don't believe me," and then he gives his pastor's name, and he says, "Call him." Right? He gives his pastor's name in the church he has, and then in a show that's getting 700,000 people, he just said, "Call my pastor," to verify I actually called him to apologize ahead of time. Like, this was what this kind of tool. This guy's just a complete tool. But then he gets into all this stuff about ESPN.
Other stuff that involved Pat McAfee and him calling out an executive and all of that other stuff. All I'm going to tell y'all is this. You don't have to mind your damn business, but I will mind mine. I'm an employee of ESPN for my day job. I don't discuss internal matters.
So he gets into this, that's all the things you have to be when you're a shill and you've been bought and sold by a corporate giant like Disney.
That is none of my business. That is above my pay grade. Pat McAfee has his show. He's responsible for everything that goes on with his show. The executives that we answer to at ESPN, they're my bosses.
They're his bosses.
And I'm not going to be stupid enough, irresponsible enough, immature enough to think about that I can talk about family business. I don't do that.
Because he wants his $8 million shill money, right? Like he's just laying it on here. Like at least he's like telling the truth. He does take Aaron Rodgers at his word, and I didn't listen to the whole thing, but he does say that he believes what Aaron Rodgers said, which is different than these other people. So he gets, I guess, partial credit for that. But this is all going into, what it is to be a corporate shill, right?
It's not going to happen. So don't expect me to speak on that ever, ever. That's not how I roll.
Yeah, you roll like a shill, right?
Having said all of that, Aaron Rodgers is a different matter because that's not necessarily an internal matter. That's a sports story. And Aaron Rodgers went on Pat McAfee's show a little more than a week ago and made news talking about one of our other colleagues under the Walt Disney banner, which would happen to be Jimmy Kimmel.
And so, this is what he's saying, right? Like he is a corporate shill. And he's at least somewhat more honest than you see with these other corporate shills. So I was going to end my coverage of Stephen A. there, but I went back and listened to not the rest of it because it was long, but I listened to what he said about Aaron Rodgers, and then he goes and first he says, he is going to take Aaron Rodgers on his word, but he should still apologize. And that sucks, and I'll show you that in a second. And then he sets in on Jason Whitlock in a very disrespectful way, right? Like he goes after him. And, they have history. And I know Jason Whitlock is always talking smack about him. But that's the same thing that happened between Jimmy Kimmel and Aaron Rodgers, right? And so he has a different standard for Aaron Rodgers and a different standard for Jimmy Kimmel. But all these people that work for these networks, everyone has to answer to something, right? We all have, pressure on us, whether it be social pressure, whether it be, people are pressuring us all the time to lie. Our loved ones, people in your life, your family and your bosses and, society in general. And you're supposed to go along with these lies. And when you don't go along with the lies or go along with the rhetoric and, especially if it's damaging and you're right. But even if you're not right, it's kind of effed up because if you say things that go against the system, it's no big deal, right? Shouldn't be a big deal because we have a system where you get to, have a First Amendment right. But the system's so fragile and it's so deceptive that it can't really handle the truth, which I've said over and over again. But these people who have been bought and sold by the beast and are gatekeepers, they don't have any credibility. Like Stephen A. Smith says, he always tells the truth, but that's not true, right? You can't work for Disney and tell the truth. You just can't, right? Like any of these corporate entities. Well, let's get into the second part of this thing. So I gave Stephen A. Smith the benefit of the doubt because he always plays things like both ways, like a true shill, right? A true ass cloud.
He said, and I'm looking for it here because I want to make sure that I find the direct quote that Aaron Rodgers said about Jimmy Kimmel, but he basically talked about, popping bottles, to be quite honest with you. He said how, everybody was looking forward to the list coming out, et cetera, just reading from my notes here. But here's the reality of the situation. When Aaron Rodgers said what he said, it did allude to it. There's no escaping that. When he said what he said, it did allude to that.
It did allude to it based on other people's misinterpretation of it, right?
You do have some wackos out there that would automatically assume that Jimmy Kimmel was going to be on the list. So because of that
negativity. But all the things that Jimmy Kimmel insinuates against all kinds of people, he gets away with that, right?
negative attention from the Epstein list that you brought towards Jimmy Kimmel, the least you could do would say, I'm sorry about that.
But Jimmy Kimmel's not going to apologize for implying Aaron Rodgers has brain damage from concussions, right? And all the things that Jimmy Kimmel did in terms of blackface and things he did with all this other stuff, which I'm going to be showing you, all those things, those are okay with you, right, Steve? Right, Stevie? Those are okay with you? But, Aaron Rodgers should apologize. So I, gave this guy the benefit of the doubt because I didn't listen to the whole thing. But he's, you're an ESPN corporate Disney shit. But then he sets in on Jason Whitlock the same way that Kimmel went after and Aaron Rodgers went after each other, right? And he calls them all these names. And for some reason, Aaron Rodgers is the only person that owed someone an apology. Like Jimmy Kimmel demanded an apology after, we're going to go through his stuff here in a second. A lot of his derogatory, obscene, creepy things that he's done. And that's just, part of it. I'm not even getting into the things he said about Trump. And so you're going to go out there and act in a way where, you don't care about hurting people's feelings or making fun of them or mocking them. I do that here. I mock people. And so I'm not going to, cry and say I deserve an apology when people mock me. Even though when I mock people, it's honest. It's truthful. Like I say things that are truthful and, are, based in something more than just mocking people for mockery's sake. I'm not mocking them just to mock them. I'm mocking them because, they're doing things that are mockable, right? It's based in their behavior and who they are as people and who they are, their brand is and what their brand says about them, and then what they're doing to censor other people and doing all the things to us, right? But even in that, we're getting mocked all the time, right? Just Stephen A. Smith ended up saying that he really loves to listen to Aaron Rodgers on the show because he's got a brilliant football mind. He just doesn't like this other garbage. But he and the people at ESPN and the sporting world, they made this into a story with Kyrie Irving and Aaron Rodgers, right? Kyrie Irving and Aaron Rodgers not getting the boop, they didn't have to be talked about. They went into their personal information because Aaron Rodgers didn't want to talk about it. It was his private medical choice, which it should have been private. But the NFL made it so people knew he didn't get it. And then they were saying, well, you lied about it. You misrepresented the truth. And he's like, I didn't want to talk about this, right? And, they don't want people knowing that these athletes that kids look up to weren't getting it. But then they made it into a story. And then Aaron Rodgers came back at them with factual information and, an information that we agree with. And, these internet shills and sheeple don't have the ability to look at or won't address, right? And we were right about so many things. We were more right than they were. And they hit the fear button and the panic button, and they're the ones who were hostile towards all of us, right, that didn't agree with the medical gulag that was going on. But you're the guys who wanted to talk about it. And he got into it personally with Kyrie Irving so much that he had apologized to Kyrie Irving and said it ended up being a battle between Kyrie Irving's dad and Stephen A. Smith, right? And, these things were, just deceptive and wrong. And he wants Aaron Rodgers to apologize, right? We're not apologizing. You guys should apologize for us for your very existence and how you are as people because you're despicable. Like you're just, you're an embarrassment to the human race. Not that we're great. I talk about how bad the truth community sucks all the time. But at least we're looking for the truth. At least we're willing to accept reality of our situation where these people are covering it up and working to increase the deception. So let's move to Jimmy Kimmel's here. So I want to show you the Tom Hanks, Jimmy Kimmel thing that, led me to see Jimmy Kimmel as the POS that he is, the toddlers and tiaras. And then I started to see all these other things that Jimmy Kimmel does. And he is a gatekeeper. Like Ellen was a gatekeeper, but he's smarter than Ellen and maybe higher up in the food chain. Because where Ellen got canceled, where Ellen was canceled, Jimmy Kimmel was not, right? And I showed you those clips. I'll show you a brief clip from my last video about this and him being misogynistic with these women and being creepy with them. But then he was creepy with toddlers and Tom Hanks. And this is where I said Tom Hanks was, creep. And I was the first person to do this, like at least as far as I know. Other people might have seen this show as well. But I started covering Tom Hanks. You know, I was covering Tom Hanks, Will Smith, and Ellen DeGeneres as people who had a high approval rating at the time. This is back in 2014 or whatever it was. And I was talking about this really creepy thing that Tom Hanks did with the toddlers and tiaras, and then the other things that he, you know, was obviously, you know, a part of, right? And that's when the QBs came in and just started saying things like that guy, Isaac Cappy, who was just a nightmare, because he called Tom Hanks a pedo and Steven Spielberg a pedo, but didn't give any evidence or anything that would, you know, there's things that, like Steven Spielberg had scenes in, you know, in the Goonies and these other things that were creepy with kids holding the statue, penis of a statue and things, which I showed you, right? But in terms of what he did and didn't do, we don't know. Like, there's things we don't know, and there's things that we can speculate, things with Tom Hanks. And the QBs came in, someone like Isaac Cappy, and just saying things like this without providing any evidence. And that's what wrecked the truth community. The truth community was wrecked by that because, you know, people like me who would come in with thoughtful videos that were, you know, would make the distinction between what's factual and what's speculation. You know, we were overshadowed by salacious, you know, things that people wanted to hear. These dumb QBs, these double-digit IQ people who just wanted to be told by somebody famous or somebody that seemed to know what they're talking about, things that they wanted to believe. And then they ran rampant with the pizza thing and the Epstein thing, and they wrecked, you know, the truth community. And they made up things and put out disinformation, right? But there is evidence here of Jimmy Kimmel being creepy, a part of the Hollywood creepy aspect of the Hollywood, the Disney creepy family, right? Disney itself. And there are things that are factual. They're not a slam dunk, but there's enough evidence to show that, and we know there's a creepiness in Hollywood, right? Now, there was the Open Secret documentary done by this woman, I forget her name, Amy, I think her name is Amy something. Doesn't matter. You can watch the video. I think it's probably on YouTube. And she went into Hollywood and found all these Hollywood agents and producers that had abused kids sexually, right? And, you know, so Amy Berg, I think her name is. And so there are things out there that, you know, show what Hollywood's all about. Of course, Corey Feldman and his, you know, his attention-grabbing things and all the rest of it. But these kids have been abused in various ways. Like those kids on Full House, they might not have been abused traditionally, you know, or explicitly sexually in some way, but they did get, you know, they were brought up into the grown-up world and sexualized and, you know, sort of wrecked in different ways. All those girls have been in rehab and had issues, psychological and otherwise. And they've had relationship things. I mean, that, you know, that one girl, the middle girl on Full House, for example, she has had, 4 or 5 marriages, and she can't see her kids. She's been in and out of treatment. She's been an addict, you know, and all these things, right? And it's because Hollywood is really bad for kids. And we all saw the stuff with Michael Jackson and the rest of it, right? And so Jimmy Kimmel's and Tom Hanks are part of that anyways. And then they did this toddlers and tiaras thing. So let's start off here, though. So let's start off with celebrity mean tweets. Now, celebrities suck, and we all like seeing them humiliated, and them reading, you know, mean tweets is kind of a comically funny idea. But then I thought about it, because this is the least of the things I'm going to show you. He's a gatekeeper, right? And he brings celebrities onto his show and humiliates them. I've talked about how that his show is filmed in the old Hollywood Freemasonic Hall. They used to have a Hollywood Freemasonic, a hall, a building, where the Freemasons used to live. And they turned it into a theater where Jimmy Kimmel films his show. And a big part of the Freemasonic order is humiliation of the plebes, the new people that are coming in. They go through this whole ritual, right? And there's a lot of humiliation in Hollywood. And let's just watch this here.
At people's hands, or at least the hands of a creepy school custodian. That is untrue and incredibly inventive and creative.
And also, Jason Momoa is a creep. No one should feel anything in their ovaries for him. You.
I hope that
So they, this is the thing, right?
George Clooney is selling loads of tequila right now. I am.
And so, so this is I realized he was a gatekeeper, and a lot of what he does on his show is about humiliating celebrities and other people, right? He's big into humiliation. But something that's a lot worse is his getting parents to tell these young kids they've eaten all their Halloween candy. And you can see that the thumbnails feature kids screaming and crying in agony and in pain that they've done this thing, right? These are all the years that he's done this. And, he tells his own daughter here he eats her Halloween candy. We'll see that here. He also got this guy to do it, Channing Tatum. He had Channing Tatum guest host for Jimmy Kimmel. Back when I covered this stuff, I'm remembering all these things now. And he got Channing Tatum, who's now divorced, and his wife to tell their young daughter that they ate her Halloween candy. And she was really kind of sweet about it, which makes it worse because you're doing an evil thing and you're lying to your kid, right?
While you were sleeping, Mommy and I ate all your Halloween candy.
What? Oh.
Look at him.
But I said I have one, don't worry.
All we left was Smarties. That's it. But we ate all the rest of it. Look. We ate it all.
Look at how creepy he is.
What do you think?
Huh? It's ready.
What, the waffles?
Yeah.
Oh. So, are you mad?
Giving her Smarties is not what the other parents do. Because having just one thing for a kid, just having one candy, that's all they can think about. So he sort of, undermined his own premise here. But there's these other shows here.
We ate all your Halloween candy. I'm so sorry.
Daniel, you'll be my best friend.
I mean, this is horrible behavior, right?
So that's why you're not my best friend anymore.
I'm so sorry, baby.
Mommy and Daddy got real hungry last night and ate all of it.
I wanted some.
But you said we could share.
Yeah, but I want all the pieces that didn't have nuts.
So this tradition that goes on every year. And Jimmy Kimmel encourages parents to, create distrust in their kids and then pull these. I mean, it's not a prank, it's a lie, and the kids are crying. I mean, this is brutal, right? It's not funny. And he's evil. This is like evil stuff, right? It's horrible to the kid and parent relationship.
Candy it's a sacred thing. For a lot of them, it's the first time they ever earn anything. So a few years ago, we had an idea for a massive prank that parents could pull on their children. I asked parents to pretend they ate all their kids' Halloween candy, record video of their child's reaction, and upload it to YouTube with the title, "Hey Jimmy Kimmel, I told my kids I ate all their Halloween candy." This
is promoting his show and doing a lot of things that are, good for him, and ended up, whatever it was for, this has been a tradition. It's horrible for the kids' relationship with their parents, for the kids' psychological development. It's just a bad thing, right? Pranks are one thing. This is something else, and it's an elaborate lie. And I want to add this here. I'm in the editing, but, you tried this once, and you see all these kids who are crying and traumatized by it, and they no longer have trust in their parents. Even think about what Jimmy Kimmel said to his daughter. When you were sleeping, which is often what these kids, parents say. And so these kids, you're going to disturb their sleep. the kids are now going to go to bed wondering if you're going to steal their candy or their toys or something, and they can't trust you. I mean, you're destroying the trust. But you can see this is a bad idea by the way the kids react, right? These kids are breaking down and having emotional outbursts, and it's like, okay, they're kids. You can do anything to them, right? That's what he's saying. They'll recover. But if you did it once, you would realize this is a bad idea. Okay, this is traumatic for the kids. Let's not do this, and it's encouraging bad behavior and lying. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel started this before he was a dad. But years later, he's still doing it, right? And doing it to his own kids.
The candy monster strikes again.
Last night, we ate every bit of your Halloween candy.
And people are laughing at this, right? They're laughing at the children's pain, right?
It's all gone.
When I was a little kid, I was 7. And, I did pranks. And I don't know when I started doing pranks. Maybe after that. And, I appreciate a good prank. But I was, my parents gave me trick candles on my birthday cake, right? There's a lot of humiliation in my family. And, we're pretty brutal, but, and I went to blow out my birthday cake, and I don't even know if, I don't even like these kind of things. Even as a little kid, but I was doing it. Like, when you're a little kid, I didn't know better. And every time I blew out the candles, they would relight. Because you blow on them and they reignite. So I couldn't blow out the candles. And they're like, we did a trick thing on you, right? And I'm like, it's my freaking birthday, right? And, I still remember it in a way that, I'm like, F you to my parents. Like, even now. I'm not emotionally hurt by it now. But it's just an effed up thing to do, right? A birthday is supposed to be a celebration. And... and I remember all the people were watching me, laughing at me or whatever it was, and I wasn't into it. And so that's way less than this. And these kids are much younger. And I was somebody who's, whatever my tendencies, and certainly I was molded by my environment, and you can see how pretty harsh and brutal I am about things. But, I remember that as being something, I don't know if I was traumatized, but it didn't help my, my view of my parents, right? It was one of the, the early times, and there was a few of them where I lost respect for my parents. And, this is way worse than that, right?
I'm sorry.
You can't just say, oh, it was just a joke and erase this, right? This is just, bad on every level.
Yes, please. All right, go finish your cereal.
So this is it, right? This is this guy, this evil MNFer. This isn't cool. This isn't a good idea. And this is someone without a moral compass. To add to this, then I found this, when I started researching that. YouTube, hey, Jimmy Kimmel, I told my dad I love him. And then he does these pranks on Father's Day, right? Hey, Jimmy Kimmel, I played catch with my dad. He's throwing stuff in his dad's face. I threw cheese in my dad's face. These are all things they do on Father's Day.
For some fun, courtesy of our viewers at home. Every year we issue a Father's Day YouTube challenge. In years past, we've asked you to spray Dad with a hose on Father's Day, to serve him breakfast in the shower, to dump breakfast on him in bed. We've had a lot of very bad ideas, but this year the challenge was simple. Sneak up on your father and yell, "I love you, Dad," as loud as you can. And I was starting to think this might not work, but I was very, very wrong. We got hundreds of videos. We went through all of them. We whittled it down to the best of the best. And with that said,
the best of the best is the most humiliating dad.
Now invite you to feel the love in our Father's Day YouTube challenge for 2017.
The guy's just taking a nap, right? beaten down, whatever it is. All these things here. Just a lot of family love there. All these things.
I love you, Dad. You're kidding me. Dad, I love you.
That was staged. The dad jumped in. They did that on purpose, right? You know, a dad has one day a year. And, you know, the way that dads have been treated now, I mean, certainly moms and dads, but dads particularly in modern day, you know, it's a thankless job. And dads are disrespected and, you know, denutted and all these things. And they have a day that you're supposed to celebrate your gratitude for them. And Jimmy Kimmel's encouraging these kids to do these things. Some of these things obviously are staged. And even that's like, you know, goofy, right? Unless the dad wants to be on TV, which, of course, you know, the whole thing is just a mess, right? And Jimmy Kimmel is, you know, really big into undermining relationships within the family. Someone who's hateful and disharmonious and, you know, just a real creep and a bad guy. So I want to re-show you this before I go to the toddlers and tiaras here. You know, I just covered this in my last video. So this is a game he played on the Man Show, and he's really pervy. These are the only two, you know, I show the thing that he does, Oprah Winfrey around. Well, that's so nice. But it was a show where, what a guy. Look at how respectful it existed, but I don't remember ever watching it. So I don't, you know. But it was a show where, by modern standards, it is all Me Tooable things. And these 4 clips are examples of ways Jimmy Kimmel should have been Me Too'd. For appropriating a culture, for fat shaming, and you have blackface and fat shaming. Around on the out. And fat shaming, and also misogynistic, sexual inappropriate behavior with women. And here he is with these girls here. Kimmel's has been so respectful of women over the years.
I've stuffed something in my pants, and you're allowed to feel around on the outside of the pants. You have 10 seconds.
You're allowed to feel around. Well, that's so nice of him. She's allowed to feel around his pants. What a guy. Look at how respectful of women he was. Look at how wonderful a man this guy is. He's allowing this, I don't know, prostitute. What's happening? He's allowing this woman to search his pants.
To then guess what is in my pants. You should use 2 hands. 2 hands.
Exactly, 2 hands, this one.
Before, haven't you?
That's funny.
Maybe it would be easier if you put your mouth on it.
Oh, that's respectful too. He's respectful. He's a champion of women.
How old are you?
18.
Okay, good. You sure of that? Because Uncle Jimmy doesn't need to do time.
Okay, so he didn't know how old the girl was, right? And so he just wants to make sure she's legal. She's just 18, so she's a young girl. He's in his 30s. He's a pig. I don't know when he got married. But he's doing this, you know, inappropriate activity. And he's checking to see if she's old enough. Then he calls himself Uncle Jimmy, which is really creepy. This whole behavior is creepy, right? Inappropriate. It doesn't jive with his feminist self. But by implying that the girl was underage and that he doesn't want to go to jail for the behavior he's about to engage with her, he's you know, acknowledging that it's sexual behavior, that these girls are doing this behavior. Of course, that's the whole bit. And that, you know, age is an issue here just legally, like in terms of he's worried about going to jail. And so he's admitting to being a perv here. This is being a perv. And, you know, it's pedo adjacent. And so he's trying to sue Aaron Rodgers for insinuating he's a pedo and a perv. And yet he is doing that himself here years ago. And again, he should have been canceled for all this stuff, but he wasn't. And then there was this. Uncle Jimmy doesn't want to do any time.
You're gonna make a fine wife.
Okay, so I'm back in real time here. You know, January 2024. And, you know, all the stuff he's doing. I showed you this before. Again, this was when he was on the Man Show, and then later he became a feminist and a liberal. but he's doing all this stuff behind her and, disrespectful and typical. This is when he was doing, in that other video, that old video, I showed you him doing blackface with Oprah Winfrey and then doing blackface with Karl Malone, which he was also fat-shaming Oprah Winfrey. Things that liberals and people that he caters to have a problem with. And when this stuff came out, it got brought back up. He went on vacation for 3 months and avoided being canceled like a true gatekeeper would. So that brings us to Toddlers and Tiaras with Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks pretended to be an overzealous dad who was trying to get his daughter, his daughter was a contestant in these Toddler and Tiaras type of pageants, and he brings her to Las Vegas for the Sexy Baby tour. I'll show you these highlights here.
Dad wants to be a pageant queen, but he can't.
And shoulder, 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 shoulder. She did some of these.
Okay, so this is the beginning part.
Some people say less is more, but I say more is more.
Miss Ultimate Sexy Baby Nevada pageant contestants.
Sweet, pretty losers, every one of them.
Again, this is a weird thing in itself, this thing that exists, these young pageant girls. Of course, there's all this weird reality TV surrounding it, and they take it to another level.
Remember we talked about focus, right? And make daddy love you. Sexy baby?
Sexy baby.
Sexy baby. All right, get up.
So that's really creepy, right? Sexy baby. I mean, sexualizing a kid is also sexual abuse. One of the definitions of sexual abuse, I have a master's in counseling, and I worked in treatment centers with kids who were teenage sex offenders and sexually reactive, so I'm kind of, an expert in this field, right? And I've talked about this for years. One of the definitions of sexual abuse is when a kid is exposed to sexual material before they're ready to handle it, right? When they're sexualized at a young age and it's not age appropriate for them to have that kind of information, exposing them to pornography, any kind of things, or putting them in an adult role like this. And then even though this is a spoof, this is what they're doing to this girl, and it's creepy, right? So it's, it's on that scale or spectrum of sexual abuse, and Hanks and Kimmel are participating in this, right?
There you go. Earn it.
Like, that's just so creepy, right? Okay, so she's singing Talk Dirty to Me by Poison. And she's doing this sexy dance, and Tom Hanks is doing along with her. It's not funny, and it's, really creepy. And then here comes the big ending here.
Sexy baby. Sexy baby. You were such a sexy baby. I'm proud of you, proud of you. Yes, yeah.
So there's that, right?
Really hard.
Miss Ultimate Sexy Baby 2011 Queen is...
There's Jimmy Kimmel's, right? And he has these non-funny skits, and often they cross the line. And there's always a demonic element to them. So I found something else I'll show you in just a moment, or YouTube recommended me something else. But, this whole thing, you look at Jimmy Kimmel's history, and he's always on the wrong side of things. And he's really into humiliation and humiliating people. And he finds it funny, real humiliation, and getting parents to humiliate their kids and catch it on tape, and getting kids to humiliate their dads and put it up on YouTube and these things, right? Promoting his show, and it's just, destroying relationships, all these bad things. And these things don't age well. And they didn't count on the truth community when they made this. And I and other people covered this. I covered this extensively, and I kept on talking about this. And then the whole pizza thing happened. And it affected Tom Hanks so much so he had to make a whole movie where he rescued a girl from being human trafficked in the Old West, right? Trying to repair his reputation. And they still haven't taken this thing down from YouTube. And it's, where's his apology for this, right? I looked at my phone or looked at YouTube on my phone, and YouTube recommended this video. It's an old video that's Hottie Body Hump Club. And it's about, he pretends to be a Hollywood exercise. Here he is with this dude here, Johansson, whatever her name is, right? Scarlett Johansson. And he's an exercise guru for all these Hollywood starlets. And this is his product that he has.
More because now you can become a member of my exclusive Hottie Body Hump Club.
Again, not funny.
Top Hollywood stars like Scarlett Johansson know Hottie Body Hump Pilates combines the flexibility of Pilates
Hump Pilates
with the sexability of humping. To make your...
You know, so, I mean, it's not funny, right? And this is, you know, even here, this would be considered misogynistic and sexist. This is long before Me Too and before he pretended to become a feminist, right? But this is what he did with his old show. This is early on in his career.
Cardiovascular system, a partiovascular system.
Hi, I'm Minka Kelly. Before I started with Jimmy K,
She was so fat she could barely even walk.
And again, fat shaming stuff that, you know, none of this stuff, you know, he's like, this is his show on ABC.
Now I feel great. And I weigh less than the average 9-year-old girl.
Thanks, Minka.
You know, bringing in 9-year-old girls, right? Like this kind of thing. And again, you know, it's pedo adjacent. And he's just a creep, right?
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Jessica Biel. And when I started training with Jimmy K, I had a mission: to get into shape, to be bikini ready, and hopefully become the kind of woman that Jimmy K would select for a lovemaking session.
So, you know, like you can see. So he added some more celebrities here.
Lunge to the left. Lunge to the right. Lunge it. Plunge it. Keep it going tight. Now hump. Hump, hump, hump. Good, hump.
You know, so you get the idea here, right? You know, it's not funny. And, you know, he's just a degraded person. And why is he whining about Aaron Rodgers after all these things that he's put out himself, right? Like, this just shows you how weak and pathetic he is. One more thing here.
That's good humpy, girls.
Let's get homo-fied.
Hump it up. Hump it down. Take a train to Humpy Town. That's good.
Again, like, just sad. Like, this is comedy. Like, how did this even make it on the air? Like, this is horrible.
Car. Even when I'm humping, I'm humping.
I'm humping too. Thanks, Eva.
It even gets more degraded here.
In there now. Come on. Make it pregnant.
Hi, I'm Emily Blunt. When Jimmy K first approached me, made me unconscious, locked me in the trunk of his car, and drove me to his private workout dungeon, I'll admit I was skeptical, but the results speak for themselves. Is he behind me? Is he wearing what I'm wearing? Oh.
You know, I mean, he's going for creep, right? Like, he's making it sound like Aaron Rodgers took his pristine reputation, like he was some pillar of the community, and wrecked his reputation and smeared his good name, right? Like, this is the stuff he's put out here. And this is just stuff I found or YouTube even recommended to me and just things I know about. I don't even watch his show. I mean, if you comb through all of his man club stuff and all of his degraded things he said over the years, all the hurtful, hostile comments and derogatory, slanderous things he said about people, and then you put him together, and then, you know, he's a bad person, right? And he's making it sound like Aaron Rodgers wrecked his reputation.
She was a disgusting hippopotamus, but now she's as hot as the devil's armpits on the 4th of July, thanks to a workout regimen that...
Again with the devil. The guy loves the devil, right? You know, I showed you the Red Brand thing he did with Mephisto, you know, Bono playing the devil, and on all that stuff, right? He's obsessed with these lower level things, degraded things. All right. It's a long video. It took me longer than I usually would have put into something like this, but it's comprehensive, right? And there's only one problem here, and that's Jimmy Kimmel whining. Because Aaron Rodgers didn't do anything, and again, you can say this is all a show and, whatever it is. But Jimmy Kimmel is a nightmare. And he is a bad person, and he puts out bad, crappy, low vibrational stuff. And he's hostile, and he mocks people, he goes after people, or whatever it is. And after a lifetime of just degraded behavior, degrading other people, humiliating them, all these things, with a negative, when I mock people here, and it's the same behavior, but I don't do it with any hatred or animosity or anger, and I could care less about it. And there's a spiritual point to it, which is, all this stuff with celebrities and power and money is not the real goal of human life. It doesn't make you happy, and it leads to degraded, lifestyle and, turning you into a degraded person for pretty much most of these people, almost all of them. But, the spiritual aspect of it. But he does it. There's a sense of malice and meanness. He's just one of those malevolent people. But, he works for Disney that has its own malice and its own obsession with, Maleficent and, these villains and all this stuff that they've been a part of. And in all that, Aaron Rodgers didn't take their BS when they came after him. The media came after him, and he gave them back what they gave, and he ended up being right like we all have ended up being right. And Jimmy Kimmel, instead of taking his beatdown, I want an apology. No, I'm going to sue you. This stuff, right? And that's what should be called out here by ESPN and everyone else. And so Pat McAfee, the show has put up, Aaron Rodgers makes a surprise appearance, talks Belichick and Saban. The Pat McAfee show is, ESPN put that up on their YouTube channel. So they're promoting this visit with Aaron Rodgers because they want to do damage control, because they realize there's lots of people who agree with Aaron Rodgers, and, Jimmy Kimmel is, there's just not a lovable, likable person. He has some fans, but it's really next to nothing. His show could have been canceled many times, but he's such a good shill that they've kept him around. But ESPN is still putting out Aaron Rodgers stuff even after this whole thing. And so, the whole thing's just ridiculous, right? They've just punked themselves. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.